Have you ever heard about the rapture? It's a concept that sparks curiosity in many. The idea that someone, while still alive, could be taken from this world in a supernatural way, both body and soul, to a heavenly place without experiencing death. But is this really in the scriptures? Or is it the result of imperfect translations or a misunderstanding? Today, we are going to explore this question in depth. We will return to the ancient pages of the Bible, look into the original Hebrew text, and discover what is truly written. After all, there are two very special characters in the Bible, Enoch and Elijah, who many say were raptured. But does the Bible actually use this term? Let's dive into these stories and uncover the truth behind this fascinating and mysterious concept. Stay with us as we explore these extraordinary cases. Now that we've talked about the concept of the rapture, let's dive into the story of one of the most mysterious characters in the Bible, Enoch. Enoch, son of Jared and father of Methuselah. Yes, the famous Methuselah, the man who lived the longest, an impressive 969 years. But Enoch, unlike his son and many others at the time, had a relatively short life, only 365 years, almost a third of his son's life. But what makes Enoch so special? The Bible tells us that Enoch walked with God. Imagine that, someone so righteous, so connected to the divine, that his path was directly alongside the Creator. But one day, something different happens. Enoch was no longer among the living. He disappears in a sudden and mysterious way. The biblical text in the original Hebrew gives us a curious clue about this. Enoch was taken by God. Why was Enoch, this man so close to God, taken so early? And more importantly, how did it happen? Many say he was raptured. But is that really what the text says? Enoch's story begins to guide us down this path full of mysteries and questions. Let's move forward to discover what really happened to Enoch and what makes him such an enigmatic figure. Now that we know Enoch, the man who walked with God, let's move on to the most intriguing part of his story, his mysterious departure from Earth. The Bible tells us briefly and enigmatically that Enoch lived 365 years and then he was no more. But what does this really mean? In the original Hebrew, the text uses the word einenu, which can be translated as, he was no more. And why? Because God took him. That's right, he was simply taken from this world, disappeared from earthly life. But does this mean rapture? Interestingly, the word rapture does not appear in the Hebrew text. There is no mention of Enoch ascending to heaven with body and soul, nor any detailed explanation of what really happened. God took him, and that's all we have. Simple, yet at the same time, extremely profound and enigmatic. So what really happened? Was it a rapture? A special removal by God for some greater purpose? What is clear is that Enoch did not experience the common death of his time, where people lived for hundreds of years. In some way, God decided that his time here had ended in an extraordinary manner. This mystery invites us to reflect. Why was Enoch taken so early? What does this teach us about his life, his mission, and God's plan for him? As we continue this investigation, let's delve into the possible reasons behind this divine decision and what it reveals about Enoch's relationship with the eternal. Now that we know Enoch was mysteriously taken from earth by God, the big question arises: why? What led the Creator to interrupt the life of someone who walked with God, someone who seemed to be on the right path? Some explanations suggest that Enoch, though righteous and God-fearing, was vulnerable. He lived in a corrupt generation, a time when evil was spreading rampantly. Imagine living in a world where people gave in to idolatry, theft, and forbidden relationships. Enoch, despite his purity, could have been influenced by these sinful practices. Perhaps God, in his wisdom, decided to take him before he could fall or be swept away by the evil around him. Another theory suggests that Enoch had simply fulfilled his mission. He lived 365 years, enough time to raise his son Methuselah, who, interestingly, would live much longer than his father. Perhaps Enoch had taught everything he could about goodness, justice, and the right way to live, even amidst corruption. After completing his mission, God called him back, taking him to a higher place. And there's more. Some believe that Enoch was taken not as a punishment, but as a reward. He walked with God, and now, after fulfilling his purpose on earth, he would be elevated to a higher spiritual level, closer to the Creator. Regardless of the reason, what we know is that Enoch was taken from this world in a special way before living as long a life as others of his generation. This deep mystery makes us reflect on each person's mission on earth and how, in some cases, when that mission is fulfilled, God acts in surprising ways. The situation grows increasingly tense, and patience is wearing thin. Jacob's sons feel cornered. Esau remains stubborn, demanding the document, while Jacob's body, their father, still needs to be buried. But at this moment of uncertainty, an unexpected figure steps in. Rim, Jacob's grandson and Dan's son, observes the conflict. He is young and deaf, and until now hadn't fully understood what was happening. He sees the commotion and asks, "Why aren't we burying Grandpa? What's stopping us?" His cousins point to Esau and explain, "It's him. He's stopping us from burying Grandpa in the tomb of the patriarchs." Hearing this, Rim feels a growing fury inside him. He looks at Esau, the one daring to block Jacob, the patriarch of the family, from resting. In an impulsive act, driven by his indignation and desire to honor his grandfather, Rim makes a drastic decision. Without a second thought, he draws his sword and, in a swift and unexpected move, beheads Esau. The shock is immediate. Esau's head rolls across the ground and something miraculous happens. The head doesn't stop until it reaches the entrance of the tomb of the patriarchs. Esau's body, however, falls to the ground outside the tomb. In that moment, everyone looks at each other, stunned. The way is clear. What seemed like an impossible conflict is now dramatically resolved. The tomb of the patriarchs is free for Jacob's burial. Yet Esau's head, separated from his body, remains at the entrance of the tomb, as if something deeper is being revealed. Now, something surprising happens before everyone's eyes. Esau's head, separated from his body, rests at the door of the tomb of the patriarchs. What seemed to be merely a tragic and violent ending reveals itself as a profound symbol. Esau's body, the part that yielded to desires, temptations, and mistakes, remained outside. But his head, the part that housed his conscience, his intentions, the part that knew what was right, this found rest in the sacred tomb. This separation is no coincidence. According to tradition, Esau was a man who, in his mind, knew what was right. He respected his father Isaac and had a clear understanding of the truth, but his body, driven by desires and impulses, always led him down crooked paths. He committed sins, engaged in violence, adultery, and materialism. His mind was pure, but his actions were corrupt. And now, in this final moment, divine justice is revealed in a subtle yet powerful way. The head, the part of Esau that contained the purity of his intentions, is honored with rest in the tomb of the patriarchs. The body, symbolizing acts of disobedience and sin, remains outside, rejected. It's as if Esau's fate tells us a truth about ourselves. Often we know what is right, we have good intentions, but our bodies, our actions, lead us astray. This scene, so symbolic, serves as a reminder that mind and body must be in harmony, and when they are not, the consequences can be eternal. Now, take a moment to think. How many times in our own lives do we find ourselves in Esau's dilemma? How often do we know exactly what is right, what God expects of us, what our conscience tells us, but in the end, our actions follow a different path? This story isn't just about Esau. It is a reflection of the human condition. Just like Esau, we all face this internal struggle between what our minds recognize as truth and the desires of the body that pull us away from it. We know what is right, what is moral, what is just, but how often do we allow ourselves to be led astray by the temptations of the material world, falling into mistakes and sins? Esau's head, with its purity of thought, symbolizes the correct intention, the mind that knows what is right. But the body, with its wrong actions, reminds us of human weakness, of how easily we stray from the path we should follow. Thus, Esau's story echoes in all of us. Perhaps you have experienced moments when you knew exactly what to do, what to avoid, and yet still made the wrong decision. The struggle between spirit and flesh, between intention and action, is a battle we fight every day. In this way, Esau becomes a mirror for our own lives. His head rests in the tomb of the patriarchs, while his body remains outside, a living metaphor for the division that so often exists within us, the mind seeking purity, and the body dragged down by human failings. And here we come to the conclusion of this powerful story, which carries a profound spiritual lesson. Esau shows us that intentions, no matter how pure, are not enough if our actions are not aligned with them. Esau's head, full of good intentions, was honored, but the body, which gave in to sin and desire, was rejected. And what does this mean for us? It means that living with good intentions is not enough. Knowing what is right, understanding the truth, is only half the journey. The other half is acting according to that truth, doing what is right, even when it's difficult, even when temptations pull us in the wrong direction. This story reminds us that we cannot justify mistakes with good intentions. Intentions are important, yes, but without the right actions, they will not lead us to the destination we desire. Esau's head rests in the tomb of the patriarchs, but his body remains outside. A reminder that intentions alone are not enough to guarantee our righteousness. Therefore, this lesson extends beyond the story of Esau and Jacob. It reflects in every decision we make, in every moment when we know what is right but are tempted to act otherwise. May we learn from this story and strive to align our intentions with our actions, so that mind and body work together in harmony, and thus we may walk the correct path, the one that brings us closer to God and His truth. And so, the head of Esau, which lives within each of us, finds its true rest, not just in thought, but in the daily practice of doing what is right. Now that we've delved into the stories of Enoch and Elijah, uncovered the mystery surrounding the term rapture, and seen how it doesn't appear in the original scriptures, one last important question arises. What do these stories teach us beyond what is directly written? These narratives, though full of mystery, show us something profound about the relationship between God and those who walk with Him. Enoch, despite living in a time of corruption, remained faithful and righteous, walking side by side with the Eternal. Elijah, in the midst of a generation that worshipped idols and turned away from God, maintained his faith and confronted kings, queens, and false prophets to defend the truth. Both, in different ways, fulfilled their missions and were taken from this world in a special manner. These stories also speak to us about purpose. Enoch, with his relatively short life, and Elijah, with his decisive role as a prophet, teach us that the time we have in this world is not measured in years, but in how we live out our mission. Both fulfilled their missions, and for that reason, God took them in a special way. Each of us has a purpose, a role to play, and when we fulfill it, our time here comes to an end, and God calls us to another destiny. Finally, these stories make us reflect on how we should read and interpret the scriptures. Sometimes, terms and concepts that become popular over time, like the rapture, may not have direct roots in the sacred texts. And this is where the importance of careful study comes in, of returning to the original, of seeking the truth in the very words of the Bible. So, what do these stories truly teach us? That the connection with God is powerful, that our missions are fundamental, and that mystery is part of the spiritual path. And above all, that the scriptures are a deep well of wisdom, a well that the more we dig, the more we discover. The journey continues. And so, we come to the end of this extraordinary journey through the stories of Enoch and Elijah. But before we conclude, let me ask you a question. What does all of this mean to you? These stories are not just ancient accounts of supernatural events. They are invitations to deeply reflect on how we live our own lives. Enoch walked with God, and Elijah fought for the truth in a world dominated by idolatry. And you, how are you living your mission in this world? Just like them, each of us is called to something greater, something that goes beyond the everyday routine. Sometimes, what awaits us may be unknown, mysterious, or even supernatural, as we've seen in these stories. But what we've learned here is that the true focus is not the rapture, or whether someone ascends to heaven in a whirlwind. The focus is the relationship with God. The focus is on fulfilling the purpose for which we were created, and trusting that when our mission is complete, God will take care of the rest, whether in a natural way or in a way we can't even imagine. So, when we look at the stories of Enoch and Elijah, we see that the true lesson isn't in the end of their lives, but in how they lived. And maybe that's what the Bible really wants to teach us: to live righteously, walk with God, face challenges with courage, and, above all, fulfill our mission while we are here. Now, how about taking these stories with you? How about reflecting on how you can walk closer to God, like Enoch, or fight for the truth, like Elijah? Maybe, just maybe, these ancient stories are telling us something very relevant about our lives and our purpose today. With that, I conclude our journey for now, but the invitation to explore and reflect remains open. The Bible, with all its mysteries and wisdom, is always calling us to go deeper. Until next time, and may you continue to seek the truth in the sacred words and in the path that God has prepared for you.